people consume the headlines. They consume the thumbnail now is the thing. Everybody wants a thumbnail where someone's going, oh my God, like we get more hits if there's a thumbnail with me going than we do if there's just me, kind of like listening and, caring. So
sure. That's why my students are bored with the PBS NewsHour, even though they learn, they always say the same thing. I learned a lot, but I was bored. And I have a clip that I use from the Daily Show where they have an editor, and he said, Jordan Klepper was interviewing him, and he said, I spend 20, 30 minutes on the headline and 5 minutes on the story.
Yes.
And that's reversed journalism. That's what gets engagement online. This is the game you have to play.
So let's lay out a little timeline. This is how I'm seeing it so that we can kind of break it down for people who are listening. So I think at the beginning of a news story, you have what you call provenance. Provenance means where did that information start? And by determining the provenance, then you can get to the real nitty-gritty of, is this real? Is this true? Is this information reliable? And then you have on the other end that we've talked about, which is how do you package that in a way that then manipulates people into thinking different things? So what I want to get at is what happens in between. How can I, as a consumer of information, get to that provenance question answered and not be manipulated on the other end by the headline or the thumbnail and we haven't even talked about the psychology, which we can talk about in a little bit, the psychology of why we want things to be controversial. Why do we want to fight each other? It is fun.
Yeah. Let's get in an argument at the end of this.
Yes. Okay. Well, if we fought here,
boost your rating.
Exactly. If we had a big ass fight, maybe we should do a thumbnail where I'm yelling at you and you're yelling at me or something.
You know what an old saying is in journalism that precedes, it goes back to the penny press era, frankly, and you know this, you've heard this before. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Because people zoom in on it. The little lizard part of our brain, I don't mean to jump right to the psychology part, but that's what's happening, is the little lizard part of our brain, which is never, probably, maybe will evolve it, but it's still here now, always looks at the shiny silver ball, and it's usually sex or violence.
How do we consume information so that we can get to that provenance, where this information came from, and assure ourselves that it's true and real? And how do we combat the fact that we're going to be fed stuff that is going to psychologically mess with us so that we do certain things, like vote a certain way or buy a certain product or hate somebody that we probably wouldn't hate if we knew them in real life,
Sure. Yeah. That's most hatred is of people you've never met. Well, let me give you something I tell my students. Journalism for the 20th century, basically, let's just put a picket fence around this, was the idea was transparency. So you would read a story or you'd see Walter Cronkite talk about it, and they would source it, right? They would say, according to White House officials, or according to the Better Business Bureau, or, right? So you would see, and this is my big argument, is always about media literacy. It's like, yes, our main outlets are not as good as it could be, but in general, I read Times, and I read it, and I trust most of what I'm seeing as it occurred, right? Mm-hmm. And the transparency was, here is the sourcing for our story. And it's kind of interesting if you go to, PolitiFact, the Poynter Institute thing that kind of judges whether this is true or not.
Can you explain why we should trust PolitiFact? You said the Poynter Institute. Tell us.
Yeah, they watch journalism, and obviously, hence the name, they kind of focus on politics. So I go there all the time. It's a great place to learn. I'll give you an example. A statistical a meme went around in 2016 from the San Francisco Crime Bureau that showed that 81% of murders of whites were committed by blacks. So this was 2016. So that thing was passed around on Facebook like crazy, right? During the election. passed around also by somebody trying to get into office. I'll
Right.
leave you to figure out who that was. It felt wrong. So if you go to the PolitiFact site about that, it gets a pants on fire. This is just a flat out lie. And then they have
Mhm.
like a middle one. There's some truth in here, and then, oh, this is totally true. They point this truth finder at both people, both parties. So, and again, it's only politics really, right? If you want to go to find out internet stuff, Snopes.com
Nope.
is great
SNP.
for debunking, I heard Hillary's got, has cancer
Right.
or Hillary has killed a bunch of people, right? And you go to Snopes and they do the same thing, which is here's why this isn't true. And they source, links. That's the great thing about the digital age is you can start to trace provenance.
Don't I need to know who is behind PolitiFacts, who is behind Snopes? Because they could be cherry picking the links. Shouldn't I research even deeper? So so I read a story and I say that looks strange that 80% of murders of white people are committed by blacks, right? Okay, I don't know if that's true. I'm going to go to PolitiFact. And you said it's the Poynter Institute. Who are they? How shouldn't I investigate that too?
They do. Yeah. Well, you can keep going down this rabbit hole till you're talking to the person who did it, right? To the one person who did it. And this is the big kind of dilemma of our age is that nobody has the time to do that, first of all, but we distrust everything. Now everybody, that's what I was talking about earlier. We all kind of trusted that we were basically getting the facts from news outlets. Now, nobody trusts anybody, right? Everybody questions everything. And that only, if you don't have that level of trust, the idea of a democracy is kind of doomed, I think. You either have that level of trust, you have people playing fair and trying to behave in a civically responsible way. They're humans. They're not going to be perfect. That's why a group of curators is better than one person curating. But I can talk about that idea of transparency. I can't answer that question. The Poynter Institute are people who look at journalism and point out its flaws, right? And
So they're like a nonprofit or something that does that.
Yeah, but much more along those lines than they're not a think tank. They're sort of a watchdog of journalism manned by journalists. So that's why I use them, right?
Okay.
So I kind of trust that they are going to be acting in good faith as best they can.
If nobody's watching and all we're doing is being sold to fight each other in order to watch stuff, we're kind of doomed. So why?
No,
why
you bring up a good point. I'm old, and I'm young at heart, but I'm an old person, and I had grown up with reading, right? And that was my window into everything, right? I'll give you an example. The fires, I got a little heated about the reaction by some people who don't live in California. And so I broke out my Cadillac Desert book. I don't know if you ever read that in college. That was big when because it was so well reported.
I might have read it. Yeah. So Cadillac Desert is about the water wars in California. Why California has water the way it is. It's a complex thing again.
Yeah.
Turn into a great narrative.
Right. But it is a long narrative. And it's not easily digested. And so when I hear people saying, well, why don't they just do this or that? There are no pat answers. These are very complicated stories. And if you can make an entertaining version of that, you should. I use Daily Show clips. And there was always this big argument. The Daily Show guys, we're not journalists. We're not journalists. We're not journalists. You ended up kind of being journalists because you're more entertaining. I'd rather watch them talk about it because I'm going to be laughing. But their argument was always the show is better, the jokes are funnier if you have the basic knowledge of the news of the day. So at the end of the day, I still think that one kernel of stepping towards news